Looking at the small model finches on display here, you wouldn't think that these little birds could have had such a huge impact on the study of evolutionary biology, but they did. You shouldn't feel bad for not knowing their importance immediately, because neither did Charles Darwin when he saw the real birds on the Galapagos Islands almost 100 years ago. He hadn't even yet thought up his brilliant theory of evolution by natural selection, because it was actually these perfectly normal-looking little birds that helped him develop the theory. Only many months after the voyage, after reviewing his loads of notes and drawings, did he write in his journal, "Seeing this gradation and diversity of structure in one small, intimately related group of birds, one might really fancy that from an original paucity of birds in this archipelago, one species had been taken and modified for different ends." Sorry, that was a bit heavy, wasn't it? Let's take a deep breath and rewind a bit. Charles Darwin was an English naturalist who is best known for his theory of evolution by natural selection. You may have heard the phrase survival of the fittest before. That comes from this theory. What it means essentially is that animals that can evolutionarily adapt to their surrounding environments have a much better chance of surviving long enough to mate and pass on these advantageous adaptations to their children. Have you got it yet? Let's return to that wordy journal entry. Seeing this gradation and diversity of structure in one small, intimately related group of birds, one might really fancy that from an original paucity of birds in this archipelago, one species had been taken and modified for different ends. Darwin was beginning to realize that birds with a beak shaped a particular way might be better at collecting the food available on their island that year, so they lived to produce more offspring with beaks like their parents, and the birds with beaks inefficient at gathering the available food don't survive. Darwin had stumbled across a very good example of evolution by natural selection. What scientists know now is that 2 or 3 million years ago, a single species of seed-eating, ground-dwelling finches migrated from Ecuador to the Galapagos Islands, where the weather patterns change rapidly and the climates are diverse. Today, that single species has branched into 14. The most distinctive difference between these 14 different birds is the size and shape of their beaks. The different sizes and shapes of beaks tell us what type of food each bird eats. Big-beaked finches can crack hard-shelled seeds to get to their tasty core, and small-beaked finches are better at eating smaller seeds. Finches that eat grubs have long, thin beaks that can pierce the earth and extract their prey, and finches that eat buds and fruit have short, blunt beaks to grind down their meal. Each species of finch has a particular area of the Galapagos where they are the best at getting food and the other species aren't. Just one species of finch became 14 through adapting to their environment. This concept has a fancy name, adaptive radiation. Now, if you know much about evolution, you might think this branching happened very, very slowly. In most other cases, you'd be right, but on the Galapagos, natural selection happens quick enough for us humans to see it happening before our eyes. Rosemary and Peter Grant, professors of ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton, have been returning to the Galapagos since 1973 to study natural selection, continuing Darwin's work. In their first year on Daphne Island, a part of the Galapagos, there was a terrible drought that killed plants that produced smaller seeds. The only available food source was the tough, spike-covered seed called the caltrop. Finches with beaks less than 8 millimeters long could not break open the caltrop, and as a result, most of these finches did not survive. Finches with larger beaks could break open the caltrops and eat. Since the surviving population had mostly large beaks, so did most of their children. So, the average beak size in the finch population increased by 0.5 millimeter that year. This is natural selection in action. Depending on environmental factors like weather and food supply, one species of finch might be better suited to an environmental niche than another, and as a result, these naturally selected finches are more likely to survive and produce more offspring that inherit their traits.